Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tadas, and I'm representing Kaunas City, the city agency of Kaunas City, which is responsible for two main things. One is the FDIs, and the second is absolutely tourists. I was informed that I'll be replacing another person from our city probably 2 weeks ago, who couldn't come to this conference as he, well, there were some changes in his career. And I knew that he would be talking about the third pillar that was today presented by the city of Amsterdam when they were talking about tourists, businesses, and residents. I knew that he would be building this presentation on residents, while our competences mainly fall into the other two pillars, namely businesses and tourists. And then I thought, what will I say during this presentation? But however, the more I thought, how will I try to build this location branding strategy, the more I realized that this third pillar with which we're not directly working, the residents, is probably the main one which allows us as a city to work with businesses and tourists, one of the main ones which allows us to attract them. I will later on explain how it happens, but it is probably without the residents and them being the ambassadors of our city when they're not in the city itself, it's one of the main reasons why we've been successful in the past. To start with, probably we are suffering from the second city syndrome just like any other city in the world. We can complain because of many reasons, because the national funding goes only to the capital, because in our geography lessons in high school, people are only learning the country and the capital of that country without thinking what is the second biggest city, but that does not matter. We are working as much as we can to make sure that our city would be known to the extent that we believe is right for it. That's one of the reasons why I'm wearing this sweater, to make you see the name. Another reason why you might have seen the name of Kaunas is because we have quite many flights connecting Kaunas to the UK airports. The reason might not be the most, let's say, optimistic for our country, because we have quite a big diaspora of Lithuanians who at one or another point have emigrated to the UK, and currently they're either traveling back or forth. But these things are absolutely changing as we're having more and more business interest. And this factor of being unknown is, well, it's not only applied to the city, it's also applied to the country. I'm pretty sure that fellows from Estonia also can relate to these things when people kind of mix which country is which here in the Baltic region. It's not untypical to hear that, well, Lithuania has a beautiful capital of Riga, which, well, is not our capital, and also to some it still comes as a surprise that we do have our own national language. So all of these things symbolize that we still are far away from identifying ourselves as a country and as a city as well. However, the main message here, that the challenge of being a complete unknown, is not that we're not seen in the eyes of the others of other European countries or further beyond. But the problem is that up until probably a few years ago, even the residents of our city were not fully, did not have a realization of what we as a city are. So before you want to show yourself to the others, you have to understand who you are at first. And that was the problem before. And this led to a lot of short-term actions that not necessarily were right for our city and the way how we wanted to be seen. It's just 5 or 6 years ago, we did have a campaign, which was, in fact, initiated by our city, which basically praised the fact that you are able to survive in our city. Not that you're proud, not that you should be thinking about the future, but you should be proud that you're able to survive in the city. You can imagine how bad the situation was regarding our identity and the way how we understood ourselves. So there's no, even back then there was no need to talk about how we want to show off ourselves to the others. And these things have changed, and that's why today I'd like to talk about the case of Kaunas and the way how things developed, how we created our identity. And by saying we, it's not the city agency, it's not the marketing department in the municipality, but rather it's the platforms of different pillars, culture, business, tourism, that existed in the city for quite some time. Simply, they received the enablement which was not here before. So first, the well, this sentence probably has been seen before, but in our case, motion creates emotion is the right thing to say. Why so? Is because we believe that enthusiasm as such is probably one of the strongest instruments any city can have when shaping its vision and branding. The problem is that enthusiasm is a temporary instrument, and if not utilized in a matter of time, it simply evaporates and is no longer here. If you are enthusiastic about something but you do not reach the results, you will get demotivated by the things you are doing. And if you are able to, and if you can enable a platform to perform at its best but it cannot deliver the results, it will get demotivated. Luckily for us, in 2016, 2017, the city was able to transform the way how we look into the communities. We were able to establish the very agency which I represent right now. We are currently shaping the image of our city. Before that, there was not even an agency, there was not a person in the municipality who was responsible for that. Secondly, in 2016, an application was filled to become the European Capital of Culture. Again, it all goes back to the enthusiasm part. And if the results would not be achieved, then you would simply say that it was all, well, a misfortune or a waste. 2017 was the key moment in our city. 2017 was the year when the residents of our city saw the results and started believing and, well, finding the identity of the city back again. 2017 was the year when our city was announced the European Capital of Culture. It will be the European Capital of Culture in a few years from now in 2022. And secondly, in a span of 2 or 3 months, we received 3 major foreign direct investments, which was which wasn't the most frequent case before. So the international exposure and recognition by international, let's say, evaluating committees from the culture point of view meant that A, Kaunas has been seen in the eyes of others, B, people started believing that we are worth something more than just being praised for surviving in the city. And this was the critical moment for building the case further on into the future. If before we were able to be proud of ourselves because of the facts that were, let's say, not fully dependent on our actions, but more realistically simply comes from our history. Just briefly, in between the 2 world wars, Kaunas was the interim capital in Lithuania, and that was one of the main reasons why what Kaunas people say they were proud of before. We are moving to another, let's say, era of being contemporary, which means much more than just like new buildings or the way how we possess ourselves and show off ourselves. It says that we find new ways of which we can be proud, and the before mentioned reasons as culture or investments is just part of it. What is more important is that we are contemporary in the way how we as a city enable our platforms. Again, the culture of capital, Kaunas European Capital of Culture, is not only a status, it's also a team currently of 50 people. It will be growing to 150 in the next couple of years, who will be directly working with this question and with the year when we'll be celebrating this special occasion. Again, business community, we were able to gather all foreign investors, which we currently count at 17 Kaunas, and they have the mandate to ask for changes in the city. The community is enabled to represent themselves. We at the municipality level no longer say that we know everything. There's no need for us to know everything because A, we absolutely have less competence than, for instance, the cultural people or the business people. That's one thing. But secondly, and probably even more important, is that if we in the municipality can have a team of 15 people working on the tourism, that's one thing. If you can enable your citizens, which in Kaunas we have 300,000, that's a totally different thing. If you can empower them to be ambassadors of your city once they're away, you definitely are in the contemporary part instead of being temporary, and you are utilizing your resources in a much more efficient manner. So that was especially the thing about the ambassadors. Quick example, in 2017, we had the first Dutch investor invest into our city. He fell in love, literally, and he also fell in love with our city. And he became the ambassador of our city. Once he went back for Christmas holidays in the upcoming Christmas, he met with his business friends. He told his story, how he established in Kaunas, how it was easy to find the employees and how the bureaucratic procedures were much more easier than where he is coming from Eindhoven, if I'm correct. And yeah, the year later, we saw 5 Dutch businesses come into our city as a direct result of him telling about the business conditions in Kaunas. So we find it much more convenient and much more efficient to work directly with the ambassadors instead of trying to think of the instruments or initiatives at the top. So if a long-term strategy can be enablement of ambassadors and platforms, that is the one of Kaunas. Afraid of the wolf, don't go to the forest. Up until yesterday, I thought that's a Lithuanian idiom, but I found out it's actually Russian. Again, it was part of our history, and that's why probably a lot of these things are in our language. But why it's extremely important is if you enable the platforms to represent your city, if you enable your ambassadors to represent the city, and if you give them the mandate without keeping the control from the municipalities or city agencies' point of view, what it means is that you are following and believing in the organic responses and organic reach that they will generate. What it means is that not necessarily that's going to be positive. However, you have to realize that, and you have to understand that the feedback that they will be providing, the feedback, also the negative feedback that they will say, that let's say that infrastructure is not sufficient right now to attract businesses, or infrastructure is not sufficient to further develop the culture, this feedback is extremely helpful for the city when it comes to improving what the city can improve. Usually it comes to the hard infrastructure that can be built and to help these communities to further develop their ideas and do not think about the bureaucratic problems. So enablement and not subordination is the way how our city went, and I truly believe that was the right decision. We believe that there are some functions, public functions at the municipal point of view, which should be controlled by the municipality and can be made more efficient, like communal services or road maintenance, because there's no, let's say, creativity or any community in the city will not have more competence than the people working in the municipality who have been doing it for years. However, there are certain fields where municipality does not have more competence than these specific pillars, let's say culture, tourism, or businesses. If you are able to outsource these services to these agencies or competence centers, and if they're not dependent on the political will, your city will greatly benefit because A, the competences will be used to their full efficiency, B, you as a city, they will have more competences. If you can also assure the financing not only for 1 year but for at least a couple of them, these things will tremendously help in planning the activities, and you'll be able to use the enthusiasm, which is one of the main instruments. So how it all went from our side, once we were able to enable these platforms and communities, they started shaping the identity from various points of view. Either it's culture, either it's business, either it's tourism. Once the identity started forming, we saw traditions appearing. Currently, Kaunas is probably the only city which is in the process of, so we are seeing that there's a mythical creature appearing in the city, which was the idea of our platforms and communities, to have this mythical beast to appear in the city, and we currently see it appearing. No one knows where it lives, no one knows how it's going to look like. Hopefully we will see it one day, just like the Loch Ness monster that there is in Scotland. But generally, we hope that's probably going to be the only mythical beast in the 21st century. And all these traditions transform into values that are created over time. Values transfer into culture, and culture is the long-term strategy. If the long-term strategy can be enabling the platforms and allowing them to fail, allowing them to express themselves solely because they have the enthusiasm, which is not always found at the public sector's level, then this is the way how we are going. And these all words would not be so effective if we did not see the results. Once the word was out about the changes happening in Kaunas, we saw huge interest from real estate developers, both residential and commercial and offices. In the last 3 or 4 years, the amount of modern stock offices, the square meters, has more than doubled. And in terms of foreign direct investments, we saw a big influx, both capital investment-wise and full-time employees-wise. So these results, in a way, also create a snowball effect. It's rolling down. We are still on the wave. And now our main challenge is to make sure that these communities that were enabled before would still find the enthusiasm and new ways how they can contribute both to their own lives, to what they believe in, and at the end, into the city's life. That was it. Thank you very much. Kaunastic wishes goes to all of you. It's not fantastic, it's Kaunastic. That's one of the things we have in our city. It's not necessarily fantastic, but again, part of our identity. Thank you.